thought we were meant to be. But her answer to "Do you love me?" left me shattered. Seeds of connection. The morning mist clung to the geodesic dome like a gossamer veil, filtering the twin suns' light into something soft and dreamlike. Ren Takashi pressed his palm against the cool bioglass, watching water droplets trace lazy paths downward. Inside the Agricultural Research Center, the air hummed with life, a symphony of growth chambers, irrigation systems, and the subtle whisper of photosynthesis happening on an industrial scale. He'd been on Kepler 442c for 8 months now, but the sight still took his breath away. Rows upon rows of Earth flora stretched before him, their green somehow more vibrant against the alien soil that sparkled with traces of native minerals. This was Project Harmony's crown jewel, the successful integration of human agriculture with Zeltharian biotechnology. The phosphate levels in Sector 7 are fluctuating again. Ren turned at the voice, soft and melodic with an accent that reminded him of wind chimes. Naya Quileth stood in the entrance, her dark hair shot through with natural silver streaks that caught the filtered sunlight. Her skin held that distinctive Zeltharian luminescence, not quite glowing, but as if lit from within by some gentle inner light. "Good morning to you too, Naya," Ren said, unable to suppress a smile. 3 months of working together, and she still jumped straight into business. No small talk, no pleasantries. It should have been off-putting, but somehow it felt refreshingly honest. She paused, a faint flush coloring her pale features. "Forgive me." "Good morning, Ren. The phosphate levels are probably reacting to the humidity spike from last night's rain," he finished, pulling up the environmental readings on his tablet. "I'll adjust the mineral feed. Though I have to say, your people's biosenses are incredible. I never would have caught that fluctuation so early." Naya moved closer to examine his screen, and Ren caught a hint of her scent. Something like jasmine mixed with ozone, uniquely Zeltharian. "My grandmother designed the original protocols," she said quietly. "She believed that listening to plants was just as important as feeding them." Smart woman. Ren found himself studying Naya's profile as she worked. Her features were delicate but strong, with high cheekbones and eyes the color of storm clouds. When she concentrated, she had a habit of tucking a strand of that silver-streaked hair behind her ear. He'd noticed that detail weeks ago and kept noticing it, which probably meant something he wasn't ready to examine. She was. Naya's voice carried a note of sadness. She passed before the alliance was formed. I think she would have loved this project, seeing our peoples work together to make something new grow. They fell into comfortable silence as they moved through the dome, checking readings and adjusting systems. This had become their routine, Ren handling the technical aspects of human agricultural science, while Naya interfaced with the Zeltharian biotechnology that made it all possible. What had started as professional cooperation had gradually evolved into something else, a partnership that felt natural, unforced. "The hybrid wheat in Section 12 is ready for harvest," Naya observed, running her fingers along a golden stalk. The grain bent toward her touch, almost as if responding to her presence. "How do you do that?" Ren asked. "The plants, they seem to know you." Naya glanced up, surprised. "All Zeltharians have some degree of botanical empathy. It's part of our evolution on a world where the line between plant and animal consciousness was always blurred." She demonstrated, placing her palm against the wheat's base. The entire row seemed to shimmer, leaves rustling without any breeze. "Can you not sense it? The life force?" Ren shook his head. "Humans are pretty disconnected from that kind of thing. We're better at manipulating than communing." "Perhaps," Naya said thoughtfully. "But manipulation requires understanding, doesn't it? You know these plants, their needs, their growth patterns, their chemistry. That's its own form of connection." Something warm unfurled in Ren's chest at her words. In the past few months, he'd grown accustomed to being the odd one out. the human trying to adapt to a world where his partners could literally speak with plants. Naya's perspective made him feel less like an outsider and more like a compliment. "Would you like to try?" she asked suddenly. "Try what?" Sensing the wheat. "I could guide you." Before Ren could overthink it, he nodded. Naya moved behind him, her presence warm at his back, as she guided his hand to rest beside hers on the wheat stalks. Her fingers were cool and slightly damp from the morning air. "Close your eyes," she whispered, her breath tickling his ear. "Don't think about photosynthesis or cellular structure. Just listen." Ren tried to quiet his analytical mind, to push aside thoughts of carbon dioxide exchange and sugar production. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of his own heartbeat and Naya's quiet breathing. Then gradually, he became aware of something else, a subtle vibration like a very quiet hum. I think I feel something," he murmured. "The life song," Naya said softly. Her hand covered his, pressing it more firmly against the wheat. "Every living thing has one. Humans just forgot how to hear it." When Ren opened his eyes and turned, he found Naya watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. They were standing very close, her face tilted up toward his, her storm-gray eyes searching his features. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing me that." "Thank you for being willing to learn," she replied, and something in her voice made his pulse quicken. The moment stretched between them, fragile and full of possibility, until the harsh chime of an environmental alarm broke the spell. They stepped apart quickly, both turning to address the technical crisis, but something had shifted. Some barrier had been crossed. As they worked to stabilize a temperature fluctuation in the citrus grove, Ren found himself stealing glances at Naya, wondering if she felt it too. This growing connection that seemed to have roots as deep as the hybrid plants they tended together. He was beginning to suspect that Project Harmony wasn't just about making plants grow in alien soil. It was about learning that some things could flourish in the space between worlds, nurtured by patience, trust, and the courage to reach across the vast distances that separated one heart from another. Growing trust. The weeks that followed their moment in the wheat field brought a subtle shift to their daily routines. Where once Naya had been purely professional, now she lingered after their work was done, asking questions about Earth that had nothing to do with agriculture. Where once Ren had eaten his meals alone in his quarters, now he found himself waiting. For her, in the communal dining area, 2 steaming cups of kava tea growing cold as they talked. "Tell me about rain," she said one evening, her chin propped on her hand as they sat beneath the dome's transparent ceiling. Above them, Kepler 442c's aurora painted the sky in sheets of green and gold. Ren looked up from his data pad, amused. "You've seen rain. It rained just yesterday." "No." Naya shook her head, silver strands catching the aurora light. "Tell me about Earth rain. What does it smell like on your world?" The question was so unexpected, so intimate in its curiosity, that Ren found himself really thinking about it. "Like life, I guess. There's this scent that comes right before a storm, petrichor we call it. It's the smell of Earth getting ready to drink." He paused, remembering. "My grandmother used to say that rain was the planet's way of crying. Happy tears." Naya's eyes softened. "That's beautiful. On Zelthar, rain sings. Different minerals in our atmosphere make it resonate as it falls. During the monsoon season, you can hear harmonies." "I'd like to hear that someday," Ren said, without thinking, then felt heat rise in his cheeks. The words implied a future that might never exist, a closeness that crossed the careful professional boundaries they'd maintained. But Naya didn't pull away. Instead, she reached across the small table and touched his wrist, her fingers cool against his skin. "I'd like to show you," she said quietly. They began sharing more than just conversation. Naya taught him the Zeltharian meditation technique called root finding, a practice where you imagined extending tendrils of consciousness into the earth, connecting with the vast network of life beneath the surface. In return, Ren introduced her to human music, watching in fascination as her luminescent skin responded to different rhythms and melodies, growing brighter with complex harmonies and dimming to a soft glow during ballads. "Your skin is like a mood ring," he teased one evening after she'd practically lit up the room during a particularly energetic jazz piece. "A what ring?" Naya asked, unconsciously touching her glowing forearm. "Never mind. It's just beautiful. The way you respond to music." The compliment hung in the air between them, more loaded than it should have been. Naya's glow dimmed to something softer, warmer. "We feel things differently than humans do," she said carefully. "Emotions aren't just internal experiences for us. They manifest. Does that make it hard to hide things?" "Sometimes." She met his eyes directly. "But perhaps hiding isn't always necessary." Their physical proximity began to shift as well. Where once they'd maintained careful professional distance, now they worked closer together. Naya would lean against his shoulder to examine his tablet screen. Ren would steady her elbow when she reached for equipment on high shelves. These touches were brief, seemingly innocent, but each one sent electricity through Ren's nervous system. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging day when the atmospheric processors had malfunctioned, throwing the entire dome's ecosystem into chaos. They'd worked for 18 straight hours, troubleshooting, adjusting, and manually regulating systems that should have been automated. By the time they'd stabilized everything, they were both exhausted, covered in soil and plant matter, and running on nothing but adrenaline. "We did it," Naya breathed, collapsing onto a bench in the center of the dome. Around them, the plants seemed to sigh with relief, their leaves rustling in the restored artificial breeze. "We did," Ren agreed, sinking down beside her. He was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how her shoulder pressed against his, how her hair had escaped its usual neat arrangement and now fell in silver-streaked waves around her face. "Ren," she said softly, turning to face him, "I need to tell you something." His heart hammered against his ribs. "What?" "Working with you these past months, it's been the most fulfilling experience of my life. Not just professionally. You make me feel," she paused, searching for words, "connected to something larger than myself." "Naya, let me finish," she said, placing a hand on his chest. He could feel the warmth of her palm through his work shirt. "My people will be rotating personnel soon. I'll be reassigned to a different project." The words hit him like a physical blow. "When?" 6 weeks, maybe less. But the harvest season isn't over. The hybrid crops still need monitoring. Someone else will handle it." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to know. I didn't want to just disappear." The thought of losing her, of returning to the solitary existence he'd known before she walked into his life, was unbearable. Without thinking, he reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the high curve of her cheekbones. "Naya," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I can't imagine this place without you. I can't imagine me without you." Her eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into his touch. "Ren." "Don't go," he whispered. And then, because the words were already out there, because the careful boundaries they'd maintained were already crumbling, he leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips were soft and tasted faintly of the sweet fruit they'd shared at dinner. For a moment, she was still beneath his touch, and panic flared in his chest. But then she was kissing him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, her body melting against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Naya's skin was glowing, with a soft, warm light that bathed them both in ethereal radiance. "Your reassignment," Ren said against her forehead. "Can you request to stay?" "I can try," she whispered. If you want me to. I want you to, he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. I want you to stay. I want us, to be real. She pulled back to look at him, her storm-gray eyes searching his face. It already is real, Ren. The question is whether we're brave enough to see where it leads. In the soft glow of her bioluminescent skin, surrounded by the plants they'd saved together, Ren knew with absolute certainty that he'd never been more ready to be brave about anything in his life. The question, the Festival of Twin Moons, came. 3 weeks later, and with it, Naya's reassignment approval. She would stay on Kepler 442c for another full rotation, 18 months that felt like a gift from the universe itself. The celebration filled the colony's central plaza with music, laughter, and the soft glow of thousands of bioluminescent decorations that the Zeltharians had grown specifically for the occasion. Ren stood at the edge of the festivities, watching Naya move through the crowd with fluid grace. She wore traditional Zeltharian festival attire, a flowing dress that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, its fabric shifting between deep midnight blue and silver with her movements. Her hair was adorned with living crystal flowers that pulsed gently with their own inner light, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. She was breathtaking, and she was his. The thought still amazed him. Over the past weeks, their relationship had deepened into something he'd never experienced before. They spent their days working side by side, their partnership so seamless it felt choreographed. Their evenings were spent in quiet conversation, sharing meals and dreams and the thousand small intimacies that built a foundation stronger than passion alone. But it was the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching that undid him completely. As if he was something precious, something worth cherishing. "You're staring," came a familiar voice beside him. Jorik Thane, his human colleague from the terraforming division, appeared with 2 cups of fermented fruit wine. "Can you blame me?" Ren accepted the drink, his eyes never leaving Naya as she laughed at something one of the Zeltharian children had said to her. "So, when are you going to make it official?" Jorik asked with characteristic bluntness. Ren nearly choked on his wine. "Official? Come on, Ren. Everyone can see how you two feel about each other. The way she lights up, literally, when you walk into a room? The way you've been walking around with this dopey smile for weeks?" Jorik grinned. "Just ask her properly. Put the poor woman out of her misery." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." Jorik clapped him on the shoulder. "Trust me, overthinking never helped anyone win the girl." Before Ren could respond, the crowd began to quiet as the first of the twin moons crested the horizon. According to Zeltharian tradition, this was the moment when the barriers between hearts grew thin, when truth could be spoken without fear. Above them, the bioluminescent trees that surrounded the plaza began to pulse in synchronized waves, their branches reaching toward the sky like arms raised in celebration. Naya appeared at his side as if summoned by his thoughts, her face glowing with excitement and wine. "Isn't it magnificent?" she breathed, tilting her head back to watch the light display. "You are," Ren said without thinking, then flushed when she turned to look at him with surprise. "Ren, dance with me," he said suddenly, extending his hand. "Please." She took it without hesitation, letting him lead her to the open area where other couples swayed to the haunting Zeltharian melody that drifted through the air. Her body fit against his perfectly, her head resting on his shoulder as they moved together. "I love this," she murmured against his neck, her breath warm on his skin. "I love dancing with you. I love working with you. I love the way you make me laugh, and the way you listen when I talk about my grandmother, and the way you taste kava tea even though you hate it, because you know I like sharing it with you." Each "I love" sent electricity through Ren's nervous system, building toward something he desperately wanted to hear but didn't dare hope for. "Naya," he said softly, pulling back to look at her face. The second moon was rising now, casting everything in ethereal double light. Her eyes were luminous, her skin glowing with emotion. "I need to tell you something." "Tell me," she whispered. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've changed everything for me. The way I see this world, the way I see myself, the way I see the future." His hands trembled as he cupped her face. "I never believed in soulmates before. I thought it was just something people said in movies. But then I met you, and suddenly I understood." Tears gathered in her storm-gray eyes, making them shimmer like captured starlight. "I love you, Naya," he said, the words tumbling out with desperate honesty. "I love your brilliant mind and your gentle heart and the way you glow when you're happy. I love your connection to growing things and your patience with my human clumsiness, and the way you make me want to be better than I am." He took a shaking breath. "I love you completely, and I need to know. Do you love me too?" The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Around them, the festival continued, but Ren's entire world had narrowed to this moment, to her face, to the answer that would determine everything. Naya's glow dimmed slightly, and something flickered across her features. Not joy, but something that looked almost like pain. "Ren," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the music. "Do you love me?" he asked again, his heart hammering against his ribs. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as if memorizing. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "No." The word hit him like a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. The festival sound seemed to fade to a dull roar, and he felt as if he were falling even though his feet remained planted on the ground. "I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping back from his embrace. "I'm so sorry, Ren." He stared at her, uncomprehending. This wasn't possible. She'd kissed him. She'd asked to stay on the project. She'd just told him she loved dancing with him, working with him, a dozen small things that added up to, but not him. Not the way he loved her. "I don't understand," he managed, his voice sounding hollow to his own ears. Naya's luminescence flickered erratically, like a candle in the wind. "I care about you. More than I can express. But love—" She shook her head. "No. I'm sorry." Without another word, she turned and walked away, her starlight dress trailing behind her as she disappeared into the crowd. Ren stood frozen in the middle of the dance area, couples moving around him like water around a stone, utterly alone despite being surrounded by celebration. Above him, the twin moons reached their zenith, bathing the world in cold, beautiful light that mocked the warmth he'd felt just moments before. The bioluminescent trees pulsed with their synchronized rhythm, a heartbeat that his own chest could no longer match. He'd been wrong about everything, about her feelings, about their connection, about the future he'd imagined stretching out before them. The realization settled over him like a weight, pressing down until he could barely breathe. Somewhere in the distance, the music played on. But for Ren, the festival of twin moons had become something else entirely. A reminder that sometimes, when barriers between hearts grow thin, what you discover is an unbridgeable distance you never knew existed. Translations: Lost. The days following the festival passed in a haze of mechanical routine. Ren threw himself into his work with desperate intensity, arriving at the dome before dawn and staying long after the artificial sunset. He recalibrated systems that didn't need recalibrating, ran diagnostics on equipment that was functioning perfectly, and lost himself in the comforting precision of data and measurements. Anything. To avoid thinking about Naya, she still came to work, of course. Their professional obligations remained unchanged, even if everything else had shattered. But the easy intimacy they'd shared was gone, replaced by a careful politeness that felt like a knife between his ribs. She spoke only when necessary, kept their interactions brief and focused on technical matters, and never met his eyes for longer than a heartbeat. The worst part was that she seemed fine. Her bioluminescent skin maintained its steady glow. She hummed softly while tending to the plants, and she smiled and laughed with the other Zeltharian team members as if nothing had changed. As if his heart hadn't broken into 1,000 pieces, right there on the dance floor. "You look terrible," Jorik observed on the 5th day, cornering Ren in the equipment storage bay. "Thanks for the pep talk," Ren muttered, not looking up from the nutrient mixture he was preparing with obsessive attention to detail. "What happened at the festival? You disappeared and Naya's been acting like she's walking on broken glass around you." "I asked her the question you told me to ask," Ren said bitterly. "Turns out you were wrong about the answer." She said no. Jorik sounded genuinely shocked. "But I could have sworn—" "Well, you were wrong." Ren sealed the nutrient container, with more force than necessary. "We both were." That afternoon, alone in Sector 12, where they'd first touched the wheat together, Ren finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of his confusion and hurt. He'd been so certain. The way she'd kissed him, the way her skin had glowed when they were close, the way she'd fought to extend her assignment. How could he have misread the signals so completely? Maybe humans and Zeltharians were just too different. Maybe what he'd interpreted as love was simply friendship filtered through his own desperate hope. Maybe he'd been a fool to think that attraction could bridge the gap between species, between worlds, between hearts that beat to entirely different rhythms. Was so lost in his brooding that he almost missed the soft sound of footsteps approaching. When he looked up, Naya stood at the entrance to the sector, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "The phosphate levels are stable," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "Good," he replied, matching her tone. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Ren, you don't need to explain," he cut her off, unable to bear whatever kindness she was about to offer. "You were honest. I appreciate that. But you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." He stood up, brushing soil from his hands with sharp, jerky movements. "You care about me, but you don't love me. It's simple." "No, it's not simple." The words burst out of her with surprising force, making her skin flare brighter. "Nothing about this is simple." For the first time since the festival, she met his eyes directly, and what he saw there made him take a step back. Not indifference, but anguish. Raw, desperate anguish that mirrored his own. "Then explain it to me," he said quietly. "Help me understand why you kissed me like that if you don't love me. Why you asked to stay on the project. Why you look at me like—" He gestured helplessly. "Like I matter." Naya's luminescence flickered erratically, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because in my language, there is no word that corresponds to your human concept of love." Ren frowned. "What do you mean?" "What you call love, this feeling of affection, attraction, caring. We have dozens of words for that. But they're all temporary states, emotions that ebb and flow like tides." She took a shaky breath. "When a Zeltharian says Kalith, our closest equivalent to your I love you, it means something different. It means, I choose to bind my soul to yours for all remaining cycles of existence. I choose to share your joys and sorrows, your triumphs and failures, your life and your death, until the last star burns out." The words hit Ren like a revelation, recontextualizing everything that had happened between them. "Naya, when you asked if I loved you, I heard you asking if I was ready to pledge my eternal soul to yours," she continued, her voice breaking. "And I said no, because I'm terrified. Not because I don't feel what you feel, but because I feel it so intensely that it scares me." Tears were streaming down her face now, leaving trails of soft light on her glowing skin. "I've cared for others before, been attracted to others, even thought I understood what humans call love. But what I feel for you—" She pressed a hand to her chest. "It's Kaleth, Ren, and that terrifies me because once that bond is made, It cannot be unmade, ever. So when I asked if you loved me, you were asking if I was ready to bind myself to you for eternity. And I panicked. She laughed through her tears, the sound bitter and broken. I've been trained my whole life to think carefully before making such a commitment, to consider the implications, the cultural barriers, the biological differences between our species. I've been taught that Kalith should be approached with wisdom and caution, and instead I fell into it like a human falls off a cliff, completely, helplessly, irrevocably. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I am already bound to you, Ren. Whether I spoke the words or not, whether it's wise or not, whether our peoples approve or not, you have my soul. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft rustle of plants responding to the emotional turbulence in the air. Ren stared at her. This brilliant, complicated woman who had just turned his understanding of everything upside down yet again. Why didn't you just tell me this at the festival? He asked finally. Because I was a coward, she said simply. Because I thought if I denied it, maybe I could protect us both from the complications. Maybe I could find a way to love you less. Intensely, more safely. She met his eyes. But you can't choose how deeply you fall, can you? You can only choose whether to be honest about where you've landed. Language of hearts. The morning sun painted the dome in shades of gold and amber as Ren found himself back in Sector 12, standing among the wheat they'd harvested together months ago. New growth had taken its place, tender green shoots reaching toward the light with the same determination that had brought him and Naya together. 3 days had passed since Naya's revelation about Kaleth, and they'd been the most emotionally complex of Ren's life. They'd talked for hours after her confession, sitting cross-legged among the plants as she explained the intricacies of Zeltharian bonding customs, and he shared his own fears about love and abandonment. But talking and understanding were different things, and Ren was still processing what it meant that she'd already committed her soul to his without telling him. I brought kava tea. Naya's voice came from behind him, soft and tentative. The way you like it, with honey. He turned to find her approaching with 2 steaming cups, her face anxious and hopeful. She'd pulled her silver-streaked hair back in a simple braid, and she wore one of her practical work tunics instead of anything formal. She looked like herself, the woman he'd fallen in love with while covered in soil and plant matter, working to build something new together. Thank you, he said, accepting the cup and settling beside her on the bench they'd shared so many times before. They sipped their tea in comfortable silence, watching the young plants sway in the artificial breeze. Finally, Naya spoke. I've been thinking about what you said, about how humans understand love differently than Zeltharians do. And maybe that's not a problem to solve. Maybe it's just a difference to navigate. She set down her cup and turned to face him fully. You asked me if I loved you, using your definition of the word. The answer to that question is yes, completely, unreservedly, with all the messy, wonderful, terrifying emotions that your species associates with love. Ren felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. And Kaleth? Kaleth is... She paused, searching for words. Kaleth is what happens when that love settles into your bones and changes the fundamental structure of who you are. It's the difference between being in love and being transformed by love. Have you been transformed? Every day since I met you, she said simply. The question is whether you want to be transformed too, not into a Zeltharian. You could never be that, and I wouldn't want you to be. But into someone who understands that love can be both a feeling and a choice, both a moment and a lifetime. Ren set down his cup and reached for her hands, marveling at how perfectly they fit in his. I want that, he said. I want to learn your language of love, and I want to teach you mine. I want to build something new together, like we do with the plants. A hybrid love, Naya said with a small smile. Human passion with Zeltharian constancy. Human spontaneity with Zeltharian wisdom, he added. Human music with Zeltharian bioluminescence. Human rain with Zeltharian singing precipitation. They were both laughing now, and Naya's skin had taken on that warm golden glow that meant pure happiness. So if I asked you again, Ren said, suddenly serious, if I asked whether you love me, knowing that I mean it in every sense of every language we speak between us, I would say yes, she whispered, in every language of the heart. Even if it scares you? Especially because it scares me. Fear means it matters. Ren cupped her face in his hands, amazed by the trust in her eyes. I love you too, Naya Quileth. In every definition of the word that exists, or ever will exist. Human love, Zeltharian Kaleth, and whatever new language we create together. When he kissed her this time, it was different from their first kiss in the emergency lighting of a crisis. This was a kiss of understanding, of acceptance, of two people choosing to bridge the space between worlds with nothing but hope and determination. Around them, the plants seemed to sigh with approval, their leaves rustling in a harmony that needed no translation. So what happens now? Naya asked when they broke apart, her forehead resting against his. Now we grow something beautiful together, Ren said. We learn each other's languages. We build a life that honors both our peoples while belonging entirely to us. A hybrid relationship? The best kind, he confirmed. Strong enough to thrive in any soil, adaptable enough to weather any storm. Naya's laughter was like music, and when she lit up with joy, her bioluminescence painted everything around them in shades of hope. I love you, Ren Takashi, she said, in careful, precise English. Then switching to Zeltharian, she added something that sounded like wind chimes and falling water. What did you just say? I said, Kaleth Nai Vedrum. My soul chooses yours, for as long as the stars remember light. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. But I also said it in the present tense, which means I'm not asking for eternity. I'm just asking for today and tomorrow, and all the tomorrows we decide to build together. That, Ren said, pulling her close, sounds like the perfect place to start. Above them, the dome's transparent ceiling revealed a sky painted in alien colors, beautiful and strange and full of possibility. And in the space between heartbeats, between human and Zeltharian, between love and Kaleth, two souls found a language that needed no words at all, the language of hands that fit together perfectly, of laughter that harmonized across species, of love that grew stronger by choosing to grow at all. Their story was just beginning, written in hybrid script across the stars.